Thank you. I'll hand it off to Sam.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here. We're gonna have a lot of fun. I'm super excited. And so we have this amazing panel. I guess I'm Sam Sabin. I cover cybersecurity at Axios. Almost forgot to introduce myself, so off to a great start. And so we have an amazing panel today. We're gonna start off, I'm gonna have each of them introduce themselves and then maybe tell me in maybe one sentence or less, let's see how creative we can be, about what creativity means to you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Sarian. I'm the global lead for cybersecurity advocacy and culture at TikTok. And I'm also a cybersecurity influencer, which is still very weird to say. But to me, creativity is literally just to create, and to create things based on your passion and experiences.
Yeah, I think she nailed it. I'm Chris Cochran. I'm the co-founder of Hacker Valley Media, also the chief evangelist at Huntress. And creativity is just like what Caitlin is saying, is taking something that didn't exist before and bringing it into a world. But it has to be something that can elicit some type of emotional response from someone.
Nice, Chris. I like it. I'm Mari Reisberg. I am a certified creativity and innovation coach. I also host the Sustaining Creativity podcast, and I'm a dance movement therapist, and I am the creativity human on the panel today. And to me, creativity is air, it's life, it's everything that means we're human. So to be creative is to be human.
Yeah. And I'm Daniel Trauner. I'm the Senior Director of Security at Axonius, which is a cyber asset management company. And to me, I think creativity really is about that hacker ethos. It's about exploring things and having a passion for figuring out how things work and coming up with unconventional solutions.
Totally. That was awesome. I think Dan kind of started off on my next question, which is, let's take this a step further. What does it mean to even be creative in cybersecurity? I feel like so many people think of it as this very technical, there are computers involved, you're hacking systems, but really, there's so much more to it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think with creativity in cyber, you have to consider there's all kinds of components in a good security program that you might expect, things like controls, processes, and there are lots of frameworks that describe all the things you need to do this really well. The problem is a lot of them don't cover how you get there, right? You have a diverse team, they have specific experiences, perspectives, skills, and the answer for how to achieve sort of a certain set of controls or processes there isn't one right answer for every company. And I think being creative is about figuring out how to use what you have on a team to achieve that end.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I spent a lot of time doing threat intelligence, which is really fortuitous in my career because I get to tell stories, right? I get to get information from disparate sources and then tell a story to a bunch of folks. I really think creativity in cybersecurity is that very humanistic concept called storytelling, right? We're telling stories, whether we're telling stories in an image or we're communicating or we're writing a report. All of that has to do with telling a story, and I think that's really what the essence of cybersecurity creativity is.
Yeah, and with cybersecurity, the threat landscape continues to change, so you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. There is no formula. It's not prescriptive. You literally have to create new ways of staying on top of things, staying on top of threats, and you have to be creative. You can't just do the same thing over and over again.
Totally. And so I think it may be super helpful to hear a little bit, just if there's a specific example of where being creative in your day-to-day job has been super beneficial.
Yeah, well, for me, I think when I think about stuff like phishing, right? If you ask any organization, what are some ways you can help defend against phishing? They might come up with things like doing simulated phishing exercises where you send an email to employees and check the click-through rate, and if people fail it, you give them training or something like that. But actually, we found, at least at Axonius, and I've seen this across other companies, that a lot of employees have very negative experiences with these kinds of simulated phishing engagements. And so we've taken other approaches where we've asked people, well, how do you want this to go? And what do you do here? And what's your job? And how is this relevant to your function? So we've done things like build training based on individual job functions. So if someone in sales asks me about phishing, I'm not going to give them some very generic example. I will show them real-world phishing that we've received as a company that has targeted our sales team. And I think meeting people in the middle there just is much more effective.
Yeah, for sure. And one of my roles is doing training and awareness at TikTok, which is amazing. But what I like to separate is training versus awareness. Training is a lot of check the box. It's more making sure that we say we're doing these things. But awareness is actual creativity around like how you're communicating that to your employees. And like you said, a lot of times people do phishing simulations, which is great, but it's what are you doing outside of that? At TikTok, we obviously enjoy short form videos. And so we like to make fun TikTok videos to represent and share fun ways of protecting yourself, protecting data, and just, again, being creative and understanding what your employees actually need to understand tough concepts, because not everyone is in cybersecurity, right? People don't even want to know about it half the time. If you're not in cyber, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. So how can we get our employees engaged and on board with making sure that they're protecting the data in the accurate way?
Creativity is a muscle, and I know you have a lot of information about creativity being lost over time. But when I spent some time at Netflix on the detection and response team, and one of the things that we would do is whoever was on call as the incident commander on that Friday, if we didn't have an active incident going on, we would play Wheel of Misfortune. So we'd have different types of incidents on this wheel, like legitimately a wheel, we would spin it, and then we'd allow the incident commander to walk through, like, how would you solve this problem? And that's an exercise that I've taken to every single team since then, because just going through the iterations of like, how does this work from a logical standpoint? What are the questions that I should be asking? What did I forget to bring up? Who should I have invited to the party sooner? So just doing that little bit of the flexing of that muscle, I think is really, really important and really impactful in cybersecurity.
Totally, and maybe building off of that, I would love to hear a little bit more just for something that I think is maybe missed often is malicious actors are so creative, right? That's partly why many of us have jobs in this room. It's just, the actors keep getting better. If we could fix cybersecurity, that would be amazing. But part of the reason we can't is because actors are creative and they're finding new outlets. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of why, or kind of maybe, why it is so important for us as defenders and for people who are educators to be creative and to bring this into our side of it rather than, just letting bad guys find new avenues and having all the creative fun themselves.
I'd honestly kick this to Mari a little bit because when the bad folks, they're living in that creative zone a lot, right? Because they're trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to affect this company? Now, how am I going to affect this company? And that might not be something that we are doing as defenders on a day-to-day basis, but you talk about how that creativity is lost over time.
Yeah, so in 1968, George Land did this longitudinal study. He started with 1,600 3 to 5-year-olds at a Head Start program and came up with this creativity or creative genius test. And 98% of 3 to 5-year-olds scored in the creative genius. He took those same kids 5 years later, and it went down considerably. It was now 30% of 10-year-olds. And he did it again at 15, and it was then only 12%. And then he did an enormous study of 280,000 adults aged 25 and up, and the creative genius score for adults is 2%. So, as you get older, your creativity declines rapidly. So we have to keep, as Chris said, flexing that muscle and using creativity on a daily basis. Now, many of you may think creativity is just performing arts, painting, singing, dancing. Show of hands if that's what you think creativity is. But creativity can be so much more than that. It's how you get dressed in the morning. It's when you open the refrigerator and have eggs, cheese, and bread. What are you gonna do with that? It's starting to look at the things that are in front of us through a creative lens. So when you're being asked to conceptualize or imagine how someone is going to hack, this is not my world, these are not my terms, hack things, sorry. You gotta use your imagination, and by thinking like a 5-year-old, you can actually start to re-engage that part of your brain to imagine what's the worst thing that could happen. A lot of times with clients, I like to ask them, give me the world's worst idea you have, and let's see how we can make it into the best idea. So when I was coming up with a coaching program, I thought, okay, what's the world's worst coach? Probably a drill sergeant, someone who's like not gonna listen, someone who's not gonna pay attention. And yet, from that drill sergeant world's worst idea of being a coach, I came up with a creativity boot camp. And I was like, that's what people are they want something quick, they want something action-oriented. And so by coming up with that world's worst idea and flipping it, we were able to come up with this program that people really enjoyed and had a lot of fun doing.
Yeah. And something that I focus on, because I was one of those people that I literally thought I was not creative. Like, I'm not good at singing, I'm not good at art, I'm not good at painting, like nothing. And it wasn't actually until I started my TikTok like 2 years ago, which ironically, their theme is inspire creativity and bring joy. I found my creativity, and it was because I was playing. I was pretending like to be a kid, and I wanted to like bring joy to people, bring joy to cybersecurity, and get more people involved in cybersecurity and like share knowledge about what cybersecurity is and how you can get in, and make it not so daunting and scary. And because of that, I was able to kind of play in that element, play with the short form videos, and it kind of exploded. And that's how I started realizing that, like, again, I am creative. We all are creative in our own ways. And just to figure out what brings you joy, what your passions are, and how you can like play in that space.
If anyone's on TikTok, definitely follow her, because I mean, she's truly an influencer. When you were going through figuring out your lane, right? Because there was definitely a period where I'm trying to find my voice in creating content. How did you find that niche for yourself?
Yeah, so when I started, there was a lot of talk about TikTok, as there still is. And I was like, the only reason I'm going to get on this platform, and also I'm older, so I was like, this is for kids that dance. That's what everyone thought. And I was like, the only way I'm going to get on this platform is be a force for good. And I was like, I work in cybersecurity. The amount of questions I get being like, oh, I wish I could go into cyber, but I'm not smart enough. I'm like, girl, I'm not smart enough either. You can get into cybersecurity. And I was like, people were very confused at how to get in, what you needed to do. They thought I just like hacked people's phones, and I was like, that is not what I do. So my first reaction was to educate people on what cybersecurity is and inspire people to actually get into the field, because we need all kinds, we need all types of people in order to stay ahead of the threats. So basically, like, because we're trying to be creative here, like we need psychologists, we need any type of person, and so it was to inspire more people to get in. And then while I was trying to figure that out, what started blowing up was my videos on how to keep yourself safe online. And something that I realized is that we are given a cellular device in our hands from a very young age, but no one's actually taught us how to protect ourselves from it, use it safely. And so a lot of those videos kind of exploded, and my motto is that I apologize to my mom and grandma, but my motto is whatever I need to tell my mom and grandma to do on their phone is what I'm going to teach people online. Yeah. So especially, I love when my mom asks me, like, can you help me with X, Y, Z? And I'm like, great, next video, that's what I'm going to do. But yeah, that's kind of how I found my lane. I still try to inspire more people to get into cybersecurity and educate people on what cybersecurity is, but it was really also just teaching people how to stay safe online and protect their data, and then know their data rights as well, because they worked in data privacy. So
totally. I kind of want to toss that question as well to you, Chris, right? Because for anyone who doesn't know Chris, he is an amazing podcast master and interview guru. And I would love to hear a little bit, and I think it'd be beneficial to hear a little bit about kind of your motivation in making that switch into kind of entering the audio and podcasting space, and what drove you to do that?
No, I appreciate that. I've been a cybersecurity practitioner for about 15 years or so, and I've always wanted to make an impact on the community, because in the very beginning I was focused on intelligence, right? I was at the National Security Agency. I couldn't speak about a lot of my work, so I was largely silent for the first 10 years of my career. And then I said, I've learned all these things. I want to start to go out there and share my experience, or even the questions that I have. And I go over to Netflix, and at the time, my business partner, Ron Dennings, who's sitting here in the front, we lived in a hacker house where it was just 4 grown men in a house, like, focused on personal growth and development. And I thought, this is fantastic, but it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale very well, right? We all can't just like take time out of our lives to go live in a house with a bunch of other folks that are focused on personal growth and development. And so what we decided was we created a show, Hacker Valley Studio. That's our first show. We've probably created 12 shows at this point, all the way from podcasts through web series and micro content. And the thing that I found most important for me is that it scales my efforts, because I love being a leader. I love helping folks. I love building teams. But if I really wanted to scale my impact on the community, I had to do it through content. Because if you have something that touches somebody in a way that makes them smile or makes them think or gives them inspiration in their job, I feel like that is really why I'm doing all the content that I'm doing. So all those messages kind of fuels me to do more, and it's the best way to scale.
Totally. And Dan, I think about this a lot, right? Because you run more of a, I guess what we all think of like a more traditional security team, right? And as a leader on that team, what are some of the ways in which you are trying to foster creativity amongst your employees, and how does this also factor into hiring decisions in terms of, who joins your team in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think creativity is something I encourage in my team a lot. I mean, the people who are actually able to flex that creative muscle, who use it regularly when unexpected things come across their desk, right? This could be, if you're in security, you know a lot of unexpected things happen. Sometimes they can be very bad. You're able to handle it that much better. And I know personally that when I haven't had time to be as creative outside of work, my mind just jumps to the kind of first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to a solution. And oftentimes it's not the best solution. So I think when looking at candidates, I love to find whatever their passion is, and this could be something totally unrelated to cybersecurity, just something that they clearly are excited about, that they push themselves to learn. But beyond that, I think a really rare trait and something that's incredibly valuable is an ability to teach yourself, an ability to learn very quickly. So I always look for questions and stories that really have someone sharing their experience of how they were able to learn something, and oftentimes that's where you start to see the creativity appear.
One of the things we were talking about before we came on for the panel, and I'm sorry for anyone that came in here thinking that, oh, thank goodness they're probably not going to talk about ChatGPT because this is a creative session. But we were talking about ChatGPT, and you used ChatGPT to create personas, right? Yeah. The potential audience to prepare for this talk. I'd love for you to kind of touch on that.
It's funny. When I first started playing with these AI models, you're just putting in sort of basic input. You're asking questions, and you're getting really basic responses. And then you start to put in more elaborate input, and you start to do things like ask it to role play. And it turns out that people are really trying to figure out now how the input and output, how the relationship between those things work with these models. And you get really good results when you're able to get really deep into the persona of the response you want to hear. So if you want feedback on an answer for a question in a panel, if you say, hey, pretend to be this audience member with this kind of experience, this background, right? You get such a deeper and more interesting answer, and I think that's been a recent episode of creativity for me.
Right. And I think it's so easy for us to sit up here and tell you all to be creative and find creative outlets. It is so much easier said than done. And so I would love to hear a little bit from you guys as well about how do you make time to be creative? How do you weave that into your day? And Mari, if you have any tips for even how to start with this, if you're just feeling a block, how do you get through that?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many ways to spark imagination or creativity. There's a professor at Stanford in mechanical engineering who designed this challenge called the 30 Circles Challenge. I don't know if any of you have heard it. Robert McKim, he designed this, and it's a page of 30 circles, and you have 3 minutes to turn the circles into as many different things as you can think of. And it's all about flexibility and fluency is about developing more ideas, and flexibility is about the different kinds of ideas, so turning things into different things. So that's a great team exercise that you could do or do by yourself and see how many of the 30 circles you can come up with in 3 minutes. But it's around, daydreaming. When was the last time you took 5 minutes to daydream or put on your favorite song and moved your body? There's a direct correlation to creativity and movement, specifically free form personally generated movement. So take a break, put on a song, and dance to your favorite song around your office or around your bedroom. These are great ways to just turn the creativity dial just a little. It's not about going from 0 to 100, but 0 to 5. Because I think when we think you gotta be creative, it's this big presentation and big thing, but creativity can be really small. And I think it's really important to remember the small pieces add up. And so when you do one small piece every day, you're really starting to incorporate more creativity into your daily life.
I love that. It makes me think of like, so you have the circles, right? You're trying to figure out all this stuff. Brian Tracy has a similar thing where he's like, all right, if anyone here wants to make $100,000 in this next year, make a list of 22 ways you can get there. And of course, you kind of start with the basics, but he's saying by that 22nd time, that's probably the idea that's going to take you to that extreme, because you're getting more introspective. One of the best things that you can do when you're trying to figure out whether it's something as deep as your purpose or the source of something, like the ground truth, is continually ask why. Like, oh, I want to do this. I want to start a podcast. Why? Oh, well, because I want to speak to people. Why? Well, because I feel like there's something missing in the world. Well, why? Well, the thing that's missing in the world is creativity. So then as you kind of go down that track, you get deeper and deeper into your own introspection, and that's one of the things I think is super useful for folks.
Yeah, I wrote kind of like a workbook to help people get into cybersecurity, and the first thing was writing your whys, and I think I said it at least 10 times. Continue to ask yourself why you want to get into the field, because that's really like what's driving them to get into the field too. So like if you're trying to ever figure out where you want to go in life, just ask yourself why a million times, and you'll probably get to it. It's a lot easier said than done, though. I've tried many times.
And asking questions is another way to flex creativity with curiosity. The average 4-year-old asks 140 questions a day.
Wow.
The average adult asks 4. So ask more questions. Be curious.
Yeah, and I think it's also, we're always set up to do, like do this. But when you step back and you like kind of sit in your being and you actually try to understand like what you want to do and your feelings and like where you want to go, that's kind of that creative route. Because I know for me, I did mechanical engineering, and it's all about formulas and like what's the next step, and there's always kind of, it's pretty prescriptive. But if you kind of step back and start thinking of other ways, that's when you're in your being, and that's when you're actually creating.
And I think sometimes opportunities present themselves. So sometimes if you're working on something in security, you might find some particular IOC or just something that seems a little bit off. And I always encourage my team, hey, if you find something like that, go down that road, go down that sidetrack, pull on the thread, figure out what you can figure out. And I think that those kind of little interjections just make the job so much more interesting, but really allow people to kind of go off, right? There's not structure, you have to find your way, and that's a very powerful tool.
Sam, I have a question for you, because obviously you ask questions for a living.
Yes, I do.
Right? So what have you learned from asking people questions about like humanity and even creativity?
Oh, great question. I personally was not prepared to be on this side of the panel.
When you have a podcast,
I know. I was thinking about that. I should have been more prepared. I think everyone just wants an opportunity to be heard and to be able to share their experience and to just talk to someone who is actually like empathetic. I mean, I talk to a wide range of people from employees at companies to high-ranking government officials, and you could be the reporter who goes in and thinks, oh, I'm gonna get them and like do gotcha journalism, but it's not beneficial. You get the best stuff when you go in and you just want to hear them out and hear their side and maybe push and challenge, especially if it's a high-ranking government official. I'm like looking through the room if they're here, but it's just everyone wants to be heard. They want the opportunity to make sure that their side is told, and I'm there to do that. I'm happy to do it. So awesome. I guess I'm curious for you guys. I mean, now that we've kind of walked through like that creative process, how you're finding inspiration, are there any like specific like examples that are coming to mind, recent events that you guys have gone through where you're like, oh, we wouldn't have cracked this unless we had like gone through this winding path, or I would not have been able to post or do whatever if if I hadn't taken that break?
I have a pretty random example, but I literally got my job at TikTok from my TikTok. So, I mean, me, being creative and trying to help as many people, they reached out to me about last year, asking actually for me to come to RSA and go to their RSA party, and I couldn't attend, but we kind of kept talking. And so my creative outlet actually ended up turning into a new job opportunity, which I was super grateful for. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, one of the things, one of the most audacious things we have ever done at Hacker Valley is, we had been podcasting for a good long while, and then one day I just get this idea, we should do a sit-down conversational style show, web series called Technically Divided, focused on all the divisive topics in technology, whether you're talking about AI, talking about Web3, is there a gap in the cybersecurity skills? And we had no business doing that. We had no business doing that whatsoever. But what's really cool about what happened is we had to find the people that could help us pull this thing together. So we found our director, Ian, who is a mastermind, and Ian knew other masterminds. And we found Ryan, who's here. He does a lot of our editing for Hacker Valley. And just bringing all these cool people together to create this show was just kind of awe-inspiring, that you could have an idea, no matter how audacious or crazy it might seem. If you get the right resources, if you have the right intention, and you know who the audience is, you can create something pretty cool.
I love it. All of that. It's great. A quick example of my own experience the other day, really high stress day, and I knew I had to record 3 podcast interviews, and I was like, this is not gonna happen, how I'm feeling right now. So I took 30 minutes and I scribbled and colored and pet my cat and did some breathing exercises and danced around my office, and in 30 minutes was able to shift my stress. My stress decreased. Creativity is a great stress reducer. It also helps with anxiety and depression, and was able to kind of come back to a sense of myself to interview these 3 podcast guests that before would not have happened as successfully.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually something I recently did on the job was we had a specific phishing campaign that was targeting our inbound sales pipeline. And the first thought that came into our head, which again often might be not the right answer, was just let's add some new email security rules. Let's try and block this in the way we always block things like this. But instead, we decided to go talk to the BizOps team, which operates our CRM and a lot of the other tech that actually drives our lead pipeline. And we educated them on this is the threat actor, this is what they're doing, this is how they're convincing people to engage with these messages. And we helped them build a control inside the CRM to block this attack way earlier in the kill chain. So instead of waiting for the email to land in the inbox, we were actually telling them, well, check the age of the domain and check some of these other properties. And if you see this combination of properties, it's not going to be a legitimate lead. And we ended up backtesting this and seeing that over years of leads, there was not a single false positive. And of course, we still did the email rule in the end anyway, but it goes to show you that kind of digging deeper, asking yourself why, right? Is there a better way of doing this? And maybe defense in depth, doing multiple things, just much more effective. And now I think when they go off and they have to add new tools or they have to change their process, they're much more likely to have this in mind and to maybe make better decisions with that new stuff.
Totally. And just a reminder for the audience, probably, I want to say like 10, 15 minutes, we'll start taking audience questions. So if you have stuff, start formulating it, get ready to be brave, head to the microphone, get creative with those questions. I think maybe this question might just be for you two, Caitlin and Chris, but if anyone else has thoughts, let me know. But I'm curious, you guys do very public, educational materials in cybersecurity. How have you found that releasing those types of things and being more creative about how we talk about threats, how we talk about the industry has helped people understand this industry? I think it's so easy if you're not in cybersecurity to hear hackers and breach and vulnerability and your eyes glaze over and you think it doesn't matter and you walk away. And I'm curious if the work that you guys are doing has helped to change those mindsets and help people engage further with the industry.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say I'd look at it in 2 different ways. One is we've all seen it, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD, right? That's a lot of the messaging that comes across in marketing. So we said, let's flip it on its head. Let's stay as optimistic and positive as possible. The second thing is we tend to be in this echo chamber of cybersecurity. We tend to say a lot of the buzzwords, a lot of the acronyms that we understand. But if we want to reach a different audience, if we want to get people that are outside of cybersecurity interested in cybersecurity, we have to boil it down to its basic components as plain English as possible. One of the ChatGPT things that people like to use is like, explain this to me like I'm 5, right? Because you can take something that's really complex and boil it down to something that's really digestible for anyone. And so that's the thing that we do. One of the exercises I used to do when I was in threat intelligence is I would take a 500-word report and I'd boil it down to 250 words. And I'm like, okay, can I cut some fat off that and boil it down to 100 words? So then there's no fat on that message, and it's as clear and as plain as you can possibly make it. So I would say it's twofold, that making it accessible and relatable to folks through optimism and entertainment, but then also just making it easy to understand for most folks.
Totally.
And I echo that. I mean, I'm pretty passionate about cybersecurity. I obviously do it in my day job, and then I do it after. I don't have a family. This is like my life, which is, I don't know if it's sad or great. I have no idea yet. Verdict's out. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the ability to make short form videos again, and you're making it fast, simple, and you're digesting, or it's easy to digest for people that have no idea what's going on. And I think that's what's helped a lot. I mean, I personally, I think every video I make is cringy. I'm not even joking. I record it, I post it, and I forget about it. I'm like, it's never, as long as it helps one person, that's all I care about. And so that's what I try to do, is help one person by each video. And the amount of messages I've been getting, like just, oh, you helped me. I found that someone was in my Apple account. I found out that, you know, my mom was like hacked, or, you know, I got into cybersecurity. I actually just met someone at our TikTok party last night saying that she got into cyber because of me, which is like the most mind-blowing thing to me. So, I mean, being creative, honestly, it helps you reach a lot more people, and like also just working in cyber and having that creative gene allows you to, continue to help more people and break things down in more layman's terms so people can understand and get excited about it, because cybersecurity is not boring unless we make it boring.
Yep.
And we aren't boring people, we're creative people. So, yeah.
Well said.
Totally. I totally agree. And I'm curious, especially for Dan and Mari, if there are any tips. I mean, part of this also, right, when we're talking about creativity, especially in the workforce. I mean, so many workers are burned out. They're stressed. It's so hard to think, oh my God, how am I going to be creative when I have like 2 people's jobs to do and threats coming at all angles? You know, if you are a manager watching your employees trying to juggle all this, you know, what are some of the tips that you might have for managers and employers in the room to help foster creativity and help people to maybe slow down and take a deep breath and manage all of this?
Well, I mean, I could start. I think I think part of it is, you know, you need to have fun, right? You got to remember these are people. People have lives, right? Your job is just a small part of your life. So I think, you know, certainly everywhere I've been, we've had stuff like, you know, custom emojis in Slack, or, you know, social channel, stuff like that. And it's good to engage with people in these ways that, you know, encourage those passions that might not have anything to do with security, because those kinds of relationships just result in better professional relationships and sort of breaks that allow you to, you know, have those moments of super intense focus, or, you know, being able to handle an incident more effectively. If you don't have that balance, it becomes very hard, and that's when you get burnout.
Absolutely. I think the foundation of creativity is safety. Personal experience of safety. If you think safe space, time, mind, and environment, and as a manager, making sure that people feel safe on your team, safe to speak up, to challenge in a respectful way someone else's idea. And so cultivating that experience of psychological safety can also help people manage some of the burnout, use more creative ideas, have more creative opportunities to engage with that external creativity, to bring it into their job, whatever they're doing on your team. But I think when we don't feel safe, that's when our creativity goes away. And if we're asking people to take risk, whether it's creative or not, when people don't feel safe, they decrease the amount of risk they're willing to take. And if uncertainty is the status quo, and many people are very afraid of the unknown, when we feel safe enough to take a risk, that's when creativity can spark and ignite on a team and more people get involved. And when you have that support from others, I think that is really when burnout and fatigue diminish and decline, so people have more joy, they have more gratitude, they have more opportunities to play with each other.
Totally. And this will be fun because I don't think I asked you guys to prepare for this. It's just off the cuff. So I'm curious to hear what comes to mind. But I am hearing all of this, and I'm wondering for you all, people who are very creative already, who understand the importance of creativity, what you're watching in the industry that you're thinking, oh, that is so creative and I love that. If there's something a vendor has recently done or an investigation that has gone down or anything like that you've seen, even as simple as like an educational video that you've seen that you're like, oh, the industry gets it. Like, we are all so creative and I love this.
I mean, for me, I've been spending so much of my free time playing with AI, even doing things with offline models and trying to fine tune models. And it's this rabbit hole where I almost feel like I'm working with something that is being understood more and more on a week by week basis, right? I mean, if I think of technology and sort of how quickly stuff goes from theoretical, right? Someone at a university is writing a research paper, and then you might see some prototype or some initial early implementation, and then you see it in production eventually. The cycle of this for a lot of these large language models and other types of generative AI has been so fast that sometimes I'll be, at RSA for a week and I'll realize, holy crap, I missed 3 really major research papers and something completely changed, and I have to now learn everything from scratch. So, I think that's something I'm watching very closely.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what Dan was saying, because I mean, this AI boom has really, I've been in technology for a while, and I haven't seen anything like this ever. I think, I don't know who said it, it was some big CEO said that this is going to be more impactful than the discovery of fire or even like the cell phone. Because the exponential growth that we have now with AI is really unfathomable at this point. It's at its nascent stage, so all this stuff is kind of cool right now, but just wait 4 weeks, 6 months, 3 years, that stuff is just going to be mind-blowing. The stuff that they're able to do right now, like they just made a Drake and The Weeknd song that wasn't real, it was generated from AI, and it sounds incredible. It was great, and that has a lot of people scared. Both folks that are making images, like graphic artists, are like, wow, if people are able to make it themselves, what good am I? Or if people can make music without us, what good am I? But I would say this, and Ron and I, we have this discussion all the time. We talk about automation. And I always hold the philosophy that no matter what technology you bring in, there's always a human component to everything that we do. If you're looking at security operations, you can automate 90% of it, but that 10% has to be a human that's able to accept that risk. The same thing on AI. Sure, you can have AI make a bunch of images, you can have it make songs, but it's really the human beings that can inject that creativity, inject that soul, that energy, that makes it special.
Totally. I'm glad we could, I found a way to get AI into the conversation. There's no escaping it. And as humans, we are very creative in how we use it and build it into our lives. So I might ask one more question and then open it up to the audience. So really get ready this time. I would love to hear a little bit from you all, and I think we've been touching on it throughout this conversation. What tips you have for finding inspiration and how you find inspiration in your day-to-day life. Yeah.
I think just start with your passions. Like, remember your 3, 4, 5-year-old self and figure out what you actually enjoyed doing back then. I mean, like Mari said, that's when we were most creative.
Yep.
And then kind of figure out how you can hone in on that and how you can bring that back to your life right now. I know for me, like, I actually was really, really good at media arts. This is back when you had like the full camcorders. And I forced my mom to get me a really big computer, and I was able to do like media arts on my computer and like make videos back a long time ago. And then I was like, okay, that was so much fun, and this is why I ended up going to TikTok and short form videos, but that was like my passion back then, and dancing is also my passion. And so I turn on music and dance in my room. No one has to know that, but now everyone knows that. But yeah, I think it's finding your passion, and like for me, it was taking a step back and was like, what did little kid Caitlin like to do so much that like brought, fuel to her fire? So that's kind of how I figured it out.
Yeah.
That's super cool. In addition to that, one thing that's almost counterintuitive, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, is that when we think creativity, we think like white space, green fields, as far as the eye can see. But honestly, I think true creativity comes in when you have constraints, even if they're self-imposed. Say, all right, I have 2 weeks to do this thing focused on this particular subject. I think that's what gets those creative juices flowing. If we have that just white piece of paper, it's like, write something. Right? Like, if you meet a comedian, what is often the thing they hear first? Like, tell me a joke. It's like, it has to be context, right? There has to be context to what we're doing. So I would say that having those limitations, those guiding principles, and even some of the constraints really is where creativity comes in.
You are absolutely correct, because creativity comes alive within boundaries, and it's so important. If you have a blank piece of paper, it can be really overwhelming and scary and not safe, and yet if you have a blank piece of paper and you can only draw on it with a black pen, you have enough of a boundary to try something, make a mark. A dot is, or a line is a dot that went for a walk.
Right.
You know, that's, and speaking of creative things that I do and incorporate some boundaries, I love going on walks. I will go walking around my neighborhood, and every time I go on a walk, I think, okay, I want to notice how many blue things I can see on this walk today, or how many yellow things. And when it's brown and green normally, and not a lot of color, I think I'm not going to find anything. But when I've set that intention of I'm going to find as many yellow items as I can, I surprise myself with how many things I actually notice. And so going on a walk is one of the best ways to spark creativity, and it's something we all have the capacity to do. Getting outside, experiencing nature, taking that break allows our subconscious mind to keep working on some problems and challenges from our regular job, but giving ourselves permission to step away and try something a little more creative. I don't know if people think going for a walk and looking for yellow items is creative, but it definitely sparks creativity for me.
Yeah, I think I've solved more hard problems after going on a walk than any other way. It's like 50-50 that in the shower. But I think to your point about constraints and how it can make it easier to be creative in some ways, I think everyone has sort of constraints based on your life experience. I know for me, a big part of my job and my entry into the industry a while back was figuring out how to apply my education, my background. I went to liberal arts school. I didn't go to like a computer-centric school. I think there were 10 computer science majors my year. There were no security courses, right? And trying to figure out how these things you've learned, whether it's kind of formal learning or just life experiences, play into your strengths and give you those constraints which actually help you be the best version of you. And I think ultimately, to the people who really are questioning whether or not they can enter the industry, I think everyone, you are a unique person and no one's gonna do things exactly the way you do. And I think the more you can kind of internalize and realize who you are, the better you're going to be at doing that, and then the better you'll be at applying those skills to a field like cybersecurity, which is honestly just getting bigger and bigger and creating more and more opportunities to do things.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I will turn it over to you guys now. If you have any questions, we have 2 mics that you guys can walk up to.
First, great discussion. Thank you all. And Chris, funny, I'm on a mailing list with technical writers, and a new technical writer once asked, well, how many words can you write in a day? And the general response was, depends on how close your deadline is. So yeah, having those boundaries. But I wanted to go back to the discussion around AI, because I'm surprised to see this come up so much since there is a lot of concern among some of the creative people I know about how much AI steals from the kind of the creative work that everyone does and uses that to do other things. So how do you embrace AI, but also then protect your work and your creativity, to not be co-opted by AI?
I would say you have to change the lens, because I can understand being a creator and you're seeing people that don't have your trade craft being able to spin up things that you've been doing for your entire career. But you almost have to realize that the genie's out of the bottle, and there's nothing you can do to take that back. But what you can do is take it from thinking that AI is stealing my work to saying that AI is going to enable me to do more, to be more creative, to have more of an impact. So I say embrace the technology and just do the best you can.
I mean, in my case, I mean actually stealing your work.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, that's not good. Yeah, no, that's no, yeah, actually stealing, no. I'll say it here now, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice, but I think there might be a situation where we're going to have to retract a lot of the stuff that we have, because if you have models that are scraping copywritten work, there might be legislation in the future that might say, hey, prove to us that you do not have copywritten work in your model. So that's just a layman's opinion and prediction, but I would say that stealing is never good, no matter what you call it.
I can add on the technical front too. There are some efforts to try and create sort of watermarks or things like bits of information that are unique, where they're reproduced in the output based on certain inputs. So I've seen things like having, if you're an artist, you can add a bit of undetectable information to visual art, and then if that art is used to train a model and that model produces output based on your art, that mark will be left there, and so you'll be able to sort of trace that. So this is all very early stuff, and it's constantly evolving, but there are people thinking about this.
And there was a lot of issues when the internet first came about. A lot of people thought it was a similar thing. They thought they were going to lose their job. There was like, what's the point? And so now I feel like Chris said, I think there's like 10, 20% of it is creativity, and I think we're going to really up our game with using it. Like we have to work together and figure out the best way to harness that amount of data and that information. But obviously, yeah, stealing's not a good thing. But I think if anything, it's going to make us better, trying to figure out how we can best use it to our advantage.
Totally.
Buenos dias. Question. I've been an engineer for 18 years, and I've just seen as people learn more about cybersecurity, there seems to be less of an affinity towards training that is more creative, kidsy. So I know like Huntress just bought Curricula. So I love what Curricula is doing in this security awareness space. But a lot of the engineers I work with are like, they just don't like that sort of thing. It's too kidsy, it's too fun. Question being, like, how would you guys approach training the current workforce, older, et cetera, really engineering minded, on security awareness things, kind of trying to bridge the gap?
A lot of people want to look for sort of the holy grail of what's going to be this training that's going to be engaging to everyone. And I think at some point, I've just sort of given up, right? I don't think it really exists in that purest form. And so the best thing to do is to figure out, well, who are you training and who's the audience? And I think this is true for a lot of, creative pursuits. You want to really understand your audience. And to my earlier point, if I'm going to talk to someone in engineering, right? If I'm going to talk to them about a particular AppSec issue, I want to really hone in on, well, what's their background? Like, what have they worked on? Even going down to small details, right? Obviously, I want to use like examples in the code they know how to write, and I want to use examples from the types of business applications that they actually work on. And I found that to be just generally the best approach, but it's a very hard problem. I don't think there's a great solution. Maybe there'll be AI-generated content that'll do a better job, but that's where we are.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. It was really inspiring because I'm also a TikTok creator back home. So I wanted to ask the creators here on the panel, how do you deal with the mean comments that you see online? Because I get a fair share of those mean comments as well. Sometimes it stops me for a little bit. So how do you deal with those kinds of opinions?
It used to be really hard for me, but now I'm like, thanks for the mean comment, because you're just driving the algorithm up to get my videos to see more people. So you're actually helping my video more than hurting it. And I kind of take it as a win, because you're not going to please everyone.
Yeah, I honestly have a degree of empathy and understanding when people do mean comments, because a lot of times it's more about them than about the content that I'm putting out. Because I mean, who is really happy and successful is going to go find your content and put a mean comment? Probably no one. But the people that are in a lot of pain and they're dealing with stuff at home, they're like, you know what, I'm in pain, so I'm gonna inflict that pain on someone else. So as long as you can kind of like understand that and register that, the comments, the mean comments, the insults, that kind of just slide off your back, and it's just kind of like, hey, I understand, I get it, but I'm gonna continue to do my comments or my content because I know it's gonna be impactful for someone.
Definitely. And also follow-up question. So in my workforce, I really don't announce to people that I'm also a creator because of the stigma that if you're just a creator, you know, you're apart from everyone else. So how do we sort of remove that thinking that if you're a creator, you're not going to be a technical person? Like, how do you remove that stigma from the other people?
I mean, I struggle with that, and I work at TikTok, so it's a little bit easier for me to say it that I'm a creator now. But when I worked at like a law firm or a consulting company, I never said it to anyone. I didn't even tell them that I was doing it on the side, and actually I don't think anyone knew until I went to TikTok. I think it's just something that you have to be confident about, and I do think there's a stigma around it, but it's just more of like we should all have general knowledge and like support other creators because we're doing it for a purpose, right? And so I will be the first to say I still struggle with that. I don't know if you guys have responses.
Yeah. No, one of our main tagline is, who says tech can't be human? Because we tend to forget that cybersecurity practitioners are humans that have other interests, right? Some people are into sports, running. Some people create content. Some people are really focused on being a parent, right? We have all these multifaceted pieces that make us who we are as human beings. And so I think we need to kind of relax, allow more of that humanity to come into our work, and understand that people come from different backgrounds and do different things. Just because I make content doesn't mean I can't sit you down and have a 10-hour conversation about threat intelligence. So understanding that people are different and have different interests, I think is important.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for coming. I think if we have like 5 seconds and people want to participate in a quick creative exercise for Caitlin, I would love that. Unless you
I was going to do a fun little selfie, but
oh my God.
if you guys want to be featured on social media.
Hey.
If you want to, and if you have to run to your next panel, I totally understand, but thank you all so much for coming. This has been amazing, and sitting with these people is so amazing and an honor as well, but I will turn it to Caitlin for like 2 seconds.
Oh, thanks. Did you guys want to like get in a selfie and
yeah,
try to get everyone in it?
Yeah, let's do
We're
it.
gonna
I don't know if it's going to work,
TikTok.
but
We'll try it.
I think it's going to be tough.
Thank you guys.
cool.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right,
everybody.
thanks,
Thank you.
panel.
Thank
Wonderful job. If everybody would take the items that you brought in with you.